Albert Destrade, and welcome alongside my co-host Orestes Destrade as we discuss all the hottest and latest news in Major League Baseball. This is our first episode of our inaugural season. And speaking of inaugural, if you look right behind the big O there, you have an ode to that 1993 Florida Marlins ball club, which you happen to lead in home runs, in RBIs, in their first season in existence. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to talk baseball with you as a legendary Marlins player and legendary figure for the Seibu Lions in Japan, and not to mention my near dear uncle.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on here, Drop and Drive. Hopefully it's going to be a show that's going to bring some out-of-the-box kind of look at baseball. Obviously, we'll talk about the X's and O's and what's going on and the latest news, week by week, but maybe some other outside-the-box type thoughts. And I think even in this show, right off the bat, we're going to have a pretty interesting one that everybody's going to enjoy and make me kind of go, and also, there's going to be a chance-making show because I think this is going to be a show that's going to, push the envelope as to where a particular, fan looks to for his information, almost like in the game of gambling. And dare I say, very well about that, having, being a high-stakes gambler yourself at the high-stakes poker and doing that for the last several years, and also being on Survivor and how to play that game. I think it's going to add a good amount of juice to what we're going to be bringing to the table and Drop and Drive.
We're excited about this product here. Oh, you bring a lot to the table. You brought a long career as a player in professional baseball, 20 years as a broadcaster. I think we're bringing the old school baseball player mentality, mixing it with the new school data modern game, and then throwing in a little bit of a wrinkle, which is that human element, right?
Yes.
That nuance that I think is sometimes overlooked when it's analytics versus old school. But I'll tell you what, let's hit the ground running and let's talk about one of the first big headline news in Major League Baseball. You hate to say it, but it's a reality. We're facing a lot of the premier arms.
Yes.
The marquee starting pitchers are experiencing unprecedented levels of arm injuries, specifically with the UCL. Look at this list of names: Garrett Cole, Framber Valdez, Shane Bieber, Spencer Strider. Oh, we're not talking about run-of-the-mill pitchers. We're talking about elite number one guys.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your thoughts on what's happening with this level of pitching injuries to the frontline starting guys.
Well, it's really dramatic, and it has been for the last several years. But then you kind of add the caveat of the new pacing of the game. Now the game has got lowered to 2 hours and 40 minutes. Why? Because of the advent of the clock. The basketball NBA 24-second clock, except it's a 15-second clock and a 20-second clock, Albert, until this past winter, where they lowered the 20-second with runners in scoring position, 15 with runners not, with nobody on base. All of a sudden, they dropped that another couple seconds. And a lot are saying, including Tony Clark, very good friend of mine, the Uber head guy of the MLB PA, the Player Association, that are kind of complaining about that. Maybe, the speeding up of the game is being detrimental to especially to their starters, to the guys that are handling that ball so many innings, trying to get up over 200 innings a game. Well, they're cutting down, and they're getting cut down quite a bit. Shane Bieber's a sad one for me because there's a kid that had 5 stellar seasons. He's going to be a free agent. Now he's going to be looking at sitting out the rest of this year, possibly the majority of next year. How does that affect his contract status? And speaking of contract status, these are the guys that get paid the most money. I mean, honestly, sans a handful of everyday players, the likes of the Harpers and the Trouts and the Otanis, it's your starters that are getting the 20, 30, $40 million a year contracts. The 200, 300. Look at Yamamoto with the Dodgers, unproven, getting a 10-year, $325 million contract. So it's a complicated math right now of these guys getting hurt and how much money you're paying to your number one ace, or one A, if you will, number one and number two.
Yeah, before I even get into the finances of it, to me, I'm looking at the why behind the what. What is leading these guys to having this level of injuries? There's a couple theories. You touch upon a great one, right? The pitch clock is, if you look at athletics at a high level, you look at guys that are elite movers, guys that are elite performers, the idea of regenerating rest and what that window looks like is an imperfect science, right? That's number one. Number two, I read some comments and I heard a quote from Justin Verlander this week that I thought was very interesting. And his brother Ben Verlander, who's a respected journalist, commented how, you look at a guy like JV who's pitched for as long as he's pitched.
Right.
He's always had 100 miles an hour in his pocket. But guess what? He's not 100 miles an hour from pitch 1 to pitch 100. He's a guy who would come in, operate at 92, 93, maybe 94. And then in those big situations with runners on second and third, maybe late in the ball game, he'd dig deep and find a little bit extra. I think the difference is a lot of these guys that are experiencing injuries, they don't pitch that way any longer. They're not pitching 92, 93 and then flashing 7s, 8s, and 9s when they need it.
Right.
They're max effort every pitch, every inning, every at-bat. I think that's one part of it. I think another part of it too, which is a little bit nuanced too. It kind of reminds me of a point that you discussed last year, which is how spring training affected the early part of the season. I remember the Tampa Bay Rays got off to that fantastic start last season.
13-0, playing at home.
And you made a really good point about how they got to play a little bit of extra time at home. Something I noticed is you look at spring training, it's the Cactus League and it's the Grapefruit League. Well, a lot of these guys that I've seen getting injured early, the Braves, to give you the most notable example with Spencer Strider, he's pitching in Florida. Spencer Strider didn't allow a run until the last inning of his last outing in spring training. Then he comes out, and his first couple starts are in Chicago, where I think it was 38 degrees
right.
At first pitch.
Right.
And then he comes back and pitches in Atlanta, and it was kind of a cold day for Atlanta. I think the weather was in the upper 50s, early low 60s. So these guys are coming. Their bodies are trained from throwing in hot, cool, comfortable temperatures, and now they're trying to ramp it up. And you know how it is. You've had your fair share of spring trainings. No matter how much you try to measure yourself or pace yourself, the juices are flowing, the adrenaline is going, and you're a guy like Spencer Strider or Garrett Cole. You're coming in hot.
Agree.
You're coming in.
If I can interject real quick, if we're just going to be about the OG and the NG, which is the old school, old gangster and the new gangster.
Yeah.
And here's the deal, though, because the OGs, they did that all the time. Louis Tiant would, spring training was in Winter Haven, and then he would be pitching at Fenway in early April at 36 degrees, or 40 degrees. So I believe in that. I also believe there's greater diagnosis than there ever was before. I'll tell you a quick story about Don Zimmer, who told me once, a longtime Boston Yankee coach, player for over 50 years in the game of baseball in one format or other. And when he was with the Rays, I asked him one day, because we were talking, I was dumbfounded by the oblique injury.
That's the new one. That's
been around for about a decade now, right? When a guy gets an oblique, it's not a week or two. It's like several weeks now.
Oh, yeah.
When they diagnose it. And it's a serious injury, and I get it, okay? Because it's not like it's not an injury. But I asked Zim, did you ever pull your oblique? And he goes, we must have not had obliques when I was playing. We didn't have obliques. Because all I knew was that, I put Ben Gay on it, and we'd wrap it, and they'd ask, the pitching coach would ask me how I'm doing. I was available today, and I'd say, I'm available today. You know what I mean? Or he wasn't a pitcher, he was a hitter. But regardless, it was like you just went out there and you played. So there's that aspect of the diagnosis is a greater diagnosis now with MRIs and all, crazy, so they can find out fine-tune injuries. And I'm not saying that to play injured. You shouldn't play, hurt. You can push playing a little injured. You definitely shouldn't play hurt. Okay, so there's a fine line on that. But nevertheless, there's something to that. And I think it also goes into training. And then we could also go to the advent in the last 20 years of these kids, and I say kids that are getting hurt at 23, 24, 25, and they, you figure, man, they're at their optimal. But remember, they grew up playing what? Travel ball. That was not around 20 plus years ago and before. So the pressures, and when you talk about the pitch clock, the pressure of that next pitch within a certain amount of time, believe it or not, does have a psychological and physical effect on your nerve endings and your muscles and your skeleton. So when you're pitching at a must-win level every weekend, as opposed to City League, Curry League, Little League, Pony League, just having a fun time, and this weekend's game doesn't matter because we're in the playoffs anyway, or whatever, it's a different modality and a different injury that possibly is going to happen. Because as you're saying, everybody's throwing at 100% now. And they're only going 4 or 5 innings anyway. Nobody stretches themselves out to think like Jim Palmer and JV does to think, I want to be here in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. They're thinking, I'm going to give you 5 good innings and I'm out. So all those factors are kind of creating a perfect storm right now of a myriad of injuries to your hefty, when all pitchers are getting hurt, Albert. But when it gets to be your Shane Biebers and your Garrett Coles, and your Striders, these are your aces. These are your $30, $40 million a year guys. It's very painful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love the Zim anecdote is fantastic. There was a great one too this week with Ozzie Guillen when he was talking about Luis Robert's injury, and he said, "Man, I don't know what it is. It's these guys with the nutrition and all that stuff." He goes, "When I played, these guys would have 3-4 cheeseburgers, half a case of Budweisers, and they go out and play every day." So I love that thing. But I'll tell you this, and just to round that up, because a couple of years ago I was looking at the way pitchers specifically were being developed in baseball. And I saw a great a note from Dane Herron where he said, you can't go on social media today and not see a group of pitchers training in like an indoor batting cage somewhere, doing a crow hop with a weighted baseball at 100 miles an hour into a net somewhere. So I was looking at this about 7-8 years ago and saying, man, hitters are going to have a hard time because I was a hitting guy. I was a hitting coach in college. And I thought, man, hitters going to have a tough time adjusting because I saw stuff kept ticking up. It used to be, when when you were in your playing days, 90s, 80s, even early 2000s, the guys throwing 95 and above
was a rarity, to be honest.
It was rarity.
I could count them on 10 fingers.
Yeah.
95 and above. Consistently
operating 95, 96.
It was Roger Clemens. It was obviously Nolan Ryan, Randy Johnson, Mark Wohlers. It's just a handful of guys consistently. Everybody else was 91, 92. 90 was the goal. Like the thing, if you threw over 90.
Right.
Well, and then all of a sudden, in the last few years, it's become, if you're not over 95, you're nobody.
Yeah, you might even get drafted. So I think what happened is the human body was built to perform in one way for a long period of time. And then through coaching and training and performance programs, you started to see guys artificially overreach their capability. The way I look at it is like, imagine a car. You buy a stock car and it's built to go 80, 85 miles an hour. And only really performance cars are built to go 100, 105.
Right.
Well, now they're taking the Toyota Camry and they're artificially juicing up the engine to make it go 100. And then they're like, why is this car breaking down when it wasn't really built to go 100? Does that make sense? That's kind of what
let's not get caught in the trap of PEDs. This isn't PEDs. This is actual training. This is actual.
Yeah.
It's not performance enhancing illegally, quote unquote, by the standards of fair play. It's performance enhancing legally by doing certain other exercises and things that would protect you. But what's happening is that you're right. I think it's the combination. That's why I call it a perfect storm of these kids pitching at a high level, especially pitchers, because of travel ball. Certain training, especially the heavy ball. You see that all throughout the major leagues. The Rays are notorious for it, and the Rays are notorious for Tommy John surgery. I mean, it's been. You could document it, how many injuries they've had with Tommy John, not just in the major leagues, up and down their minor leagues, because they all do the same training. So I believe it's the training plus the advent of pitching at a high, pressure level from the time that you're 10 years old all the way to the ones that make it to pro ball. It's become a problem.
Yeah, the combustibility in pitchers and the volatility has become so high that honestly, I think the market might adjust. And dare I say this, I would compare and liken a lot of these pitchers in Major League Baseball to another sport in our country and another group of athletes. And I'm started to look at the numbers, and tell me if this rings a bell or resonates with you at all.
Okay.
I'm starting to look at frontline pitchers the way NFL teams evaluate and pay their frontline running backs.
So you're saying that maybe the pitchers the next NFL running backs?
Dare I say, is the starting pitcher the next version of right?
Right. Well, listen, the reality is that it's a valid point. First of all, I will say this. Number one, in the imagery of the sport and the sports, NFL and baseball, the number one ace, your number one guy, your Garrett Cole, your Strider, your Shane Bieber, they're to be kind of compared to the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Bradys and the Russell Wilsons. They're the quarterback when technically they're nowhere near the quarterback of a team. Only maybe because, Tyler Glasnow looks like Tom Brady. Realistically, does not mean
that he's throwing the ball. And he's throwing the ball. He's holding the ball.
He's holding the ball and throwing the ball, but he's not the quarterback of the team. The irony of baseball is that the quarterback of the team is actually your catcher, who is, compared to be the center on a football team, the trenches guy,
right.
The one that gives you the ball to then throw it out. No, the catcher is the one that, ironically, is the one that looks at and really reads the defense, not the other team's defense, but your own defense.
Right.
He's the one that's going, moving this guy over here, moving this guy here. He's controlling where the pitches is going. What pitches he's throwing, even if he's going to throw through it on first and third. He is a true quarterback. That's why, believe it or not, catchers make the best managers. Some of the best managers in the history of baseball have been catchers, not pitchers. So there's a little chasm right there that's kind of an anomaly of people thinking, well, the starting pitcher is the quarterback. He's not. He's actually more akin to the running back, because he's the guy that's handling the ball a lot and getting you to a particular place in the game that you have an opportunity to close the game out and win, which is what a good running back does for you. He establishes the run, be able to open up the game. So a good pitcher gives you fight in this day and age. If you really want to talk today's, NG baseball, the new gangsters, it's give me 5 innings and get me to that winning potential, keep it under 3 runs, and I have a chance to win. So
yeah, it's a committee. Think about this.
Oh, yeah.
Think about how that running back position has evolved. This isn't the Chicago Bears with Walter Payton running it right. 40 times a game.
Yeah, OJ back in the day. And
this isn't Thurman Thomas and Ricky Williams, man.
Oh.
There are no more bell cows.
There's three or four guys.
There's 3 or 4 guys. It's a running back committee, and that's by necessity. And we're seeing that same evolution in pitching.
Well, you're saying that. Let me ask you this question then. This is a dramatic question because quarterbacks get paid $30-40 million. Number 1 and number 2 starters get paid $30-40 million after they've got, they've gone through arbitration and free agency. Running backs do not get paid that money. Should teams now start considering and do what the NFL did, which was kind of controversial when they first started doing this 5 or 6 years ago? I even got upset that they weren't going to be paying or caring as much about the all-star running back anymore. AP, Adrian Peterson, and these guys. All of a sudden, we're like, not that they're obsolete, they're still uber important, but they're not getting 5-year, $150 million contracts anymore.
Well, look at the parallels, though. Think about in the NFL, some of the biggest guys that have held out, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, a lot of these guys that are doing it, we kind of saw that parallel already happen this offseason with, I say Le'Veon Bell, we have Blake Snell.
Yeah.
You have Jordan Montgomery. I mean, these are guys, think about this. I
thought they were going to sign $300 million deals.
The 2 biggest free agent starting pitchers, one of whom not only was a frontline starter, was the reigning National League Cy Young winner.
And the other one, a World Series hero.
World Series hero, entering what should be a pitcher's prime, right? Late 20s, beginning of 30s. That's kind of the pitching prime, that last 28 to 33, 34 window. And they both received. Snell was late after spring training, got a 2-year deal with an option, and Jordan Montgomery got 1 year. He got a 1-year deal.
Unbelievable.
So I think that maybe this puzzling offseason that we had in Major League Baseball isn't so puzzling after all, and maybe these organizations, because both of them really smart organizations, right? Farhan has done a fantastic job over with the Giants, so I think he knows what he's doing a little bit. And the Diamondbacks,
great. I love him with the Giants. He's been fantastic.
The Diamondbacks, another really smart organization, so I think they know something that other teams hadn't quite done or seen or prepared for when it comes to the dollars and cents. That's where to me is the big indicator in this whole thing.
The tough part with baseball is that obviously, they've done such a great job, the Players Association, with the manipulation or the matriculation, if you will, of how to present their arbitration players and then more importantly their free agent players in a really optimal, high gaining scenario, right? So if you come out after 3 years and you're a pretty good pitcher, you're jumping to $6 million, in year 4. You're jumping to 9 in year 5. You're at 11. This is all through arbitration. This is all signing, unless you sign the quote unquote sweetheart deal, right? But now so what I think is going to happen, and what you're trying to tell me, if I'm understanding you right, it might be the years. You just may not see, the anomaly will be Yamamoto because of the confusion of like who wanted Yamamoto. Is this guy, he's 25, and stuff like that. And they got caught up in the hullabaloo of the $700 million deal with this compadre from Japan and Shohei Ohtani, and the Dodgers just bid in. But sources that I know close to me for a couple of two major league teams in the city known as the Big Apple. So you can imagine who they were. They told me we weren't touching that with a 10-foot pole. We were not going to go and commit 10 years and over $300 million. They were more in the $200 million range. So the Dodgers jumped in, but maybe you might not ever see those. Maybe that's what's happening because the money's going to probably still be there. The $15, $20 million a year deal, but you're just not going to see and commit 5, 6, 7, 8 years. There's too many injuries going on.
There is too many injuries. And I think as it always happens in the game, there's adjustments and there's shifts in the market. So on that note, let's jump into a segment here, guys. So this segment is called Beef or No Beef. Here we're going to bring up a couple interesting topics, and O and I are going to discuss whether we're on the pro side maybe a little bit on the con side. And speaking of committing years and extensions, news out of down here locally in Miami, the Miami Marlins and reigning National League Manager of the Year, Skip Schumacher,
great year last year,
had a fantastic year, led them to a playoff berth, was kind of an upstart bunch.
Right.
Have announced an interesting story, They Skip Schumacher, still under contract for 2024, had an option for 2025, and in a move that I don't think is very common, have announced that they are choosing to not exercise his option for 2025. So they're not letting Schumacher go, but they're not committing to stay with him through 25. Your thoughts on the situation and how the Marlins organization is handling it? Do you have beef with that situation, or do you have no beef?
I have a beef with it because I have kind of both. To be honest with you, I have a beef because I don't know exactly the insides of that story and whether it was a team release or whether it's an interesting journalism release at the time that the Marlins start 0-8, 1-11. Okay, 0-9, I believe, before they won their first game, and now they're 1-11. So all of a sudden, that goes out in the news. So I have a beef if it's the team saying that. They don't need to throw that out there. Though the reason I don't have a major beef with it, this was before the season started, so they had agreed that they were not going to extend the option, and they could have started out 11-1, and then I guess maybe this story would come out also, in the transverse side and go, you decided, to agree to not extend. So this could be a mutuality. We don't know the complete insides of it, but the reality is that it came out, they started 1-11. This was before they started 1-11, and it doesn't mean that he's not available. Let's say they turn the ship around, they have a decent season. I wasn't expecting them to do a whole heck of a lot anyway, just to be solid. They have a nice, season, but I'm not expecting them to, to really challenge the Phillies, dare I say, the Atlanta Braves, who are the best offense in baseball, even without some of the pitchers being hurt right now. But nevertheless, they could bring him back next year. So, the option is still available, but it's just curious that it comes out and they're 1-11 and all of a sudden the news leaks out, even though it was something already that was quietly agreed upon before the season.
Yeah, I have beef with it. I'm on the beef side here, and I'll tell you why. I think the Marlins, man, what an interesting organization. It's a team that's developed some really quality young pitching, who's had a couple bursts and glimpses of success and being competitive.
They've also had injuries too, by the way.
They've had injuries.
We're just talking about what we were just talking about. Yuri Perez just went down.
Yuri Perez is on that list. Sandy Alcantara is currently out for this year. I think about this, though. This team made the postseason in 2020, albeit a COVID-shortened year. They made the postseason in 2023. You know who I compare this team to? They remind me a lot of the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
Think about these parallels. They're a small market team with two very big spending, big name laden teams, right? Mm-hmm. The Marlins have the Braves and the Phillies. The Diamondbacks have the Dodgers and the Padres.
Sure.
But guess what? What's the difference? The Diamondbacks showed support of Torey Lovullo, especially even in 2022 when they were not a competitive ball club. Yeah. And guess what that team did in 2023? They rallied around their identity of we're the Cinderella, we're the underdog, no one believes in us. And guess what happens? They went to the National League Championship Series against a Philadelphia Phillies team that everyone in baseball thought was going to steamroll them. And guess what?
100%.
They beat the Phillies. They beat the Phillies, and they went to the World Series, man. That's it. So my point is, when you're a team like that who's fringy and who's already counted out by a lot of pundits, I think one thing you need to pitch is we are in this together.
Right.
We're in this together. And when you show a lack of continuity and a lack of support for Man, I'll tell you what, a first-year manager who did a yeoman's effort coming in and following Don Mattingly and reinvigorating a little bit of life into that clubhouse, a little bit of belief, a little bit of energy. Right. I think that it was, whether it was a PR thing or whether it was a business decision, I didn't like the way they handled it, so I have a little bit of beef with them.
I agree with you. I think there's beef there, and it has to fall back on the organization. So however it got leaked out, they need to do a better job of protecting that situation. You know what I mean? Or having dealt with it in spring training to have it already be said. So then if you do start 1-11 or 11-1, it's already been discussed. Hey, before the season, we agreed, for whatever reason, or maybe they state the reason. Oh, maybe Schumacher says, you know what, I'd be cool with waiving that deal because I may want to, flap my wings to a big boy team. You're going to tell me that Schumacher, even if they have an abysmal season, it's not going to be a manager in demand in 2025 of the teams that there's always 3 or 4 that lose managers. So it could have been, you just don't know. But I agree with you. I put it on the Marlins for not handling this PR scenario in spring training and kind of spreading the news properly. I
agree with those points. And speaking of flapping your wings and moving on to bigger and better things, the Oakland A's announced this week that they are moving to Sacramento, California for a period of 3 years and then moving to their permanent home in Las Vegas. Oh, I got to ask you, this situation in Oakland, do you have beef with John Fisher and how that ownership has handled the situation, or is it just business and you got no beef?
It's a tough one because this is a Bay Area team, right? And I have been, for many, many years now, involved with the other Bay Area team that has been in this tumultuous situation of small market, we need a stadium. Small market, please give us a stadium. And it hasn't materialized, right? Even the Rays now are still in a very, kind of mired in uncertainty if this is going to really happen. So I don't have a beef, again, with the reality of how difficult it is to create, a stadium deal. Those things don't just materialize. You have to have a lot of, pieces and puzzles put in the right place. What I have a beef is ownership. And that is that if they put enough money and put their money where their mouth is, that they want a stadium, it's coming out of their mouth, Albert, then put in the extra hundreds of millions of dollars that seals the deal. Because what usually municipalities and states and the area, the community want to see is a quid pro quo of a public-private, deal. It's definitely not going to be all, taxes, and it doesn't need to be all on the team. The last person to do that I can think of was Jerry Jones building his own stadium. You got to go back to Joe Robbie Stadium where I played at. Over here,
right behind you,
he built his own stadium. Right, the Dolphins own that stadium. The new ownership, Ross and Co. So the reality is that MLB does not push that narrative. They don't push the narrative. They push the narrative like you're the commodity. They should come to you, but you have to meet them, if not halfway, at least a good third or more of the way. That has not happened with the two ownerships of the Bay Area in Oakland and the Bay Area in Tampa Bay. So hence you end up getting in a problem. So what is weird in this thing, I'm going to add a different caveat, is why the heck aren't they playing then in Vegas with the beautiful AAA stadium there and just go ahead and start, as they're building the stadium for the 3 years, you build the synergy for the community and the city and then send your AAA team to Sacramento. There has to be something to that. Why they haven't done that, but I feel mostly for both Bay Area fans, especially, honestly, for the Oakland fans, even though I'm a Tampa guy. You know why? Because Oakland has a huge, longer history of baseball, you know what I mean, and championships and the glory years of the 70s and the 80s of winning championships. And that's kind of being ripped away from them. And I don't see them getting baseball over there for a heck of a long time.
Yeah, I look at this situation, and it almost seems like something out of a movie. It almost seems like the movie Major League with the Cleveland Indians is coming to life. I mean, what that ownership group has done. I mean, first of all, look at it from a baseball standpoint. This is a team that actually was pretty competitive year in, year out.
Always has been.
They had a Tampa Bay. It's funny you mentioned the Tampa Bay Rays. They had a Tampa Bay Rays feel to them where they were never big spenders. Everyone knew that. But they remained highly competitive, and they always seemed to recycle young, controllable, affordable talent. And, man, not only are they dismantling this franchise, but before that, they dismantled this team. They the list of stars and legitimate high-caliber major league players that they discarded it's pretty sad to see how their players were distributed. That's point number one. And then in addition to that, I agree with you. They're doing their fan base a major disservice. So you're telling me right now, if I'm a fan of the Oakland Athletics, I'm supposed to watch that team become effectively the laughingstock of baseball with a poorly funded facility, a team that's effectively a 4A team talent-wise,
right?
A stadium that's, by most regards, not even really major league quality any longer.
No, it's past its prime.
Way past its prime. Then you're going to shuttle us to Sacramento for a 3-year run to, another inadequate facility to then have the hopes of going to Las Vegas and channel exactly what fan base. To me, it's a puzzling, kind of sloppy, incoherent strategy. And it's really sad, man, because like you said, it is a franchise with some history. It's a franchise with some success. It's a team and a franchise that really at one point had a really passionate fan base.
Dramatic. I mean, their fan base you could say, and here's another, embarrassing thing for Oakland. They were Raider-like. You know what I mean? They were Raider-like. They were just dramatic. They were different. Finley, the owner, was such a eccentric owner, and the whole thing, and brought championships. That you have that. But I'm going to add one other little caveat to that, and that is MLB. And the problem with this whole thing, and the irony that it's the two Bay Area teams that are struggling, can't get the stadium, can't get deals done, trading away and not signing their free agents and losing. I mean, if you made an all-star team of the A's and the Rays of the last decade, you would have an all-star team. You know what I mean? From David Price to Carl Crawford to, what do you got at first base over there?
Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, and Matt Chapman, Josh Donaldson's.
It's crazy. So that being said, here's the problem. Rob Manfred has said that until those two scenarios aren't solidified, until they both have a new stadium deal that's going to be coming. So now you have seemingly Oakland fixing their problems, quote unquote. They're going to be going to Sacramento, building the stadium, and hopefully that whole thing will come to fruition properly. It looks like that's what's going to happen, right? The Rays they're almost there, but they're not there yet, whether it's going to be in Tampa, whether it's going to be redone in the St. Pete area as a Trop. Until those things aren't done, they can't do something big that they want to do. And that is expansion. That is to go to Nashville and go to Utah, because those are the two places that I think that are going to be the two prime places. Yes, sir. I don't know if you just saw in the news this past week, Utah approved a $900 million MLB stadium and parks and the whole, build out scenario in Salt Lake City. So this city is getting ready for Major League Baseball, and it's going to be an expansion team. And Nashville, I don't have to tell you about Nashville. It's mucho dinero, in Nashville. So that takes care of the East-West scenario. But it will not happen, and Manfred has said it, until those two scenarios have been solidified and taken care of. So they're trying to get there. It's
an interesting story, and it's unfortunate. I hope for the A's they can find their final home, get settled, and hopefully bring a little bit. You know what? I'll tell you, this is exciting for Las Vegas. It's a city that's, man, they went from no franchises to now they're going to have football.
The Raiders, hockey, and the A's, they got all of Oakland coming to Vegas.
Everyone's going to Vegas, man. It's a beautiful thing. So I got beef with the Oakland A's, but I got no beef with the Las Vegas A's.
Yeah, I know you don't have beef with Las Vegas.
And speaking of Las Vegas, that brings us to our next segment here, which I think is an interesting one. There's a term in poker and in gambling when someone
at the high stakes level,
at all levels, when someone presents himself to be a high roller,
right,
but they're really a fugazi, they're really not the real deal.
Right,
they want to look like a big flashy guy. We call those guys fake action.
Ooh.
So in Vegas, you want to avoid beating fake action. So this next segment is the real deal or fake action. We're going to cover some players, some teams, some situations, and you and I are going to discuss whether we think they are the real deal or they're fake action.
Shoot it.
Our first person here is a player on those New York Yankees. And I remember you talking to me about him this time last year, and you said, you know what, I got high hopes for this kid.
Right.
And he had what some would call a disappointing first year. I think he was bottom 3 in on-base percentage.
Yep.
The fan base was a little hard on him. But this year, he's come out to a pretty hot start, and that is New York Yankees shortstop Anthony Volpe. What do you have on Volpe? Do you think he's the real deal or he's fake action?
Listen, he is MLB's version of Ant-Man. You know that there's the Ant-Man already in the NBA. We brought into the show a little bit of NFL. We're going to bring in a little bit of NBA, with the Ant-Man and Anthony Edwards, who is just phenomenal, right? He's the next Michael Jordan. Dare I say, is this the next Derek Jeter? This Ant-Man? I don't know, but I'm telling you something. He's starting to look like that for me. He's starting to look like a Derek Jeter-esque type of a hitter. He's covering the whole plate now. He's made some adjustments that his swing, he's not swinging and missing as much. I watched him a lot being here in Tampa in spring training and, gotten to know him a little bit and know his family. In fact, Dr. Volpe, his dad, I've met on a couple of occasions, and beautiful family from the New York area. So this is a kind of a homegrown kid and destined to be a Yankee shortstop. When you talk about Yankee lore, you always talk like the spine of the game. Who's going to be your Yogi Berra, who's going to be your Whitey Ford, who's going to be your Tony Kubek at shortstop, and who's going to be your Mickey Mantle. Well, right now they've got, Garrett Cole is playing Whitey Ford, and you have Aaron Judge is playing Mickey Mantle to the nth degree with the 62 home runs a couple years ago. Can this kid play Derek Jeter, Tony Kubek? And I really think he is. I think he's the real deal action, and one of the reasons is that he's made that adjustment of the swings and misses. There was just way too many swings and misses last year. He's always had a compact, strong swing, but he was jumping out a little too much. He's sitting down a little bit better, hitting the ball the opposite field. I think he's a 300 hitter in the making consistently with a guy that could possibly, I think he could hit 30 home runs. So I think he's Derek Jeter with a little more power. The defense is above average. He gets a little erratic for me, and he speeds up a little bit the game, a little bit defensively. But that's also going to come because he's still in his early 20s. So I think this is a superstar in the making, buddy. Real action.
I am with you on him. I studied him a little bit last year, and I thought, man, this kid's fake action. Another kind of overhyped prospect because the Yankees have missed on some prospects.
Yes, they have.
You had some superstar can't misses. And, Clint Frazier's, Miguel Andujar's, guys of that ilk where, even right now there's some questions about Jason Dominguez and his health because he was the next big thing. But, you got to remember this. This guy's only 22 years old.
Yeah, no doubt.
And it's not easy to step in and play shortstop in Yankee Stadium under the bright lights wearing the pinstripes. And I look at the adjustments, and I agree with you, I think the approach is quieter. One of my first indicators when I evaluate a young guy is this: how are they taking pitches?
Right.
And in the at-bats that he's showcased early this season, I've loved some of his takes where he's really seeing the ball well, and I think he's calmed down some of the moving parts. He's calmed down some of the moving, diving at the baseball, like you said.
Yeah.
So he's calmer. He looks mature at the plate. And this is what I like about him, O. In terms of the Jeter qualities, this guy doesn't look like a kind of guy that is flashy or wants the attention. He looks like a baseball rat to me.
Right.
He runs down the line and gives you a hard 90. He runs out to his position and is in the right place at the right time. He's the kind of guy who has the baseball rat lunch pail mentality. And I think that's always kind of been a signature of the best Yankees, right? They're guys that are in the lineup every day. They're guys that love playing the game the right way. And I think he's cut from that cloth. Juan Soto has more of the flair, and some of these other guys are a little flashier. I think this is more of an in-the-dirt gym rat, almost like a JUCO player who plays the game with a chip on their shoulder.
That was Jeter.
And that's how Jeter played, man. He was a do the right thing, be in the right place, do your job mentality.
Right.
And I can see this guy being in a team that's had a lot of injuries and had a lot of big names. They haven't had a lot of consistency in the lineup. I can see this be a kid who gets plugged in for 155 games a season, year in and year out. And that's something that the Yankee lineup, that and his athleticism, right? His ability to run the bases.
24 stolen bases last year. This guy, and his on-base percentage, we're talking 12 games, right? They're 10-2, and he's got a 444 on-base percentage. It's not going to stay at that clip. But it was 167 strikeouts last year. So there was a lot of swinging and missing.
A lot of it.
But that comes with the quietness that you're talking about, and also comes with, just as a former hitter at the major league level, the knowledge of learning and churning pitchers regularly. The 12 to 13 man staff of so many teams that you get to see through 150 games. How many games did he play last year? He ended up appearing in 159 games last year, right? So you're talking about, lunch pail guy, day in and day out. But that was a great education because now he's learning the pitchers, he's learning how they throw at him, and he's bettered his swing and calmness. If he can cut that strikeout to like 120, right? Dare I say under 100, that would be dramatic. I mean, I might be asking a lot to keep it under 100, but in that 110, 120, now all of a sudden, that's going to raise your on-base percentage 30 or 40 points, right? When he was, like last year, he was at 287. 287. Yeah, so he needs to be at 350, right?
Oh, this guy, dare I say, if he's in the 350 on-base range and you take him for where he's hitting right now in that 6-hole, and maybe you slide him to the 1 or 2 hole.
Oh, he's eventually going to be a one hitter. He's going to do what Jeter did. In his career, you have to put Jeter at the back end, and then they put Jeter in the number 2 hole for a long time. Then he ended up learning, the game, and he was your leadoff guy. And he's got way more athletic ability than Derek Jeter ever had.
Oh, you lead him off behind Juan Soto and Aaron Judge.
If you can get there by the second half of the season, that would be a speed up. But if he can get there, because I am not a fan of Gleyber Torres leading off, I'm going to tell you right now.
I agree with you.
There's too many big, swings. And
he's a 6-hole hitter to me.
He's a 6-7 hole hitter. And a good 6-7 hole hitter. It's the back of the lineup that you want that can give you pop and can reignite the lineup again and turn it over a little.
Stretches you out a little bit. I agree with you there.
Wow. No, that 1, 2, 3, 4 would be 4, 5. Because if Rizzo starts hitting like he can, which I think he can, now you're talking about a formidable lineup. You're talking the Atlanta Braves lineup, which is ridiculous.
Which is definitely not fake action, and I'm with you. I think Volpe is the real deal.
I put my money on him.
Shifting over to another guy. There's a lot of news, and we talked about it earlier in the program, about the big dollars going to free agent arms, and you mentioned his name earlier with Yamamoto. But there was another pitcher that came over from the Japanese Nippon League. And he didn't get as much notoriety as Yamamoto.
Right.
But, what he's doing early in the season, I'm going to read these numbers to you. He's got 10 innings pitched, 0 earned, 12 Ks.
Yeah.
And he's come out and been really kind of a pleasant surprise. You're probably pretty familiar with him. He's a left-handed arm, Mr. Shota Imanga. What do you tell me what you've seen from him with your knowledge of the Japanese game?
Well, what I'm seeing is exactly what I knew of him already. And not only is he crafty, and remember we were talking about the 95 and over. He's not an over 95 guy. He's a guy that's going to stay right around 92, 94. He'll pop you every now and then a little 95 and give you that little extra bit. But he's so deceiving and sneaky and holds the ball late, with his arm. And then obviously he's got an incredible curveball, really good control with his split. He runs the ball, with the two-seamer. As most Japanese pitchers, they have a great understanding of the strike zone around the strike zone. They really hit those corners, the 4 quadrants of up and in, up and away, down and in, down and away, with all of their pitches. I mean, that's just a notorious Japanese thing. So when you can have that, when you're a lefty, movement, and you can pop every now and then at 95, you're in another potential league. Now, what's going to happen is that I think he's going to have early success. He's going to have a lot of early success. He may tire out a little bit in the second half, and that's when if that fastball drops into closer to his other breaking pitches, that's where he's going to be in a little bit of trouble. So the only concern that I have for him is, the not the health, but being able to have enough endurance for the longevity of the major league season. Because you have to understand, in Japan, they have less teams. There's not 30 teams. There's 12 total teams. So a pitcher, though they use them for longer outings, they'll throw 7 innings. They'll throw complete games. They pitch very spread out. A starter will actually get 6, sometimes 7 days rest. So because of the fact that there's more off days, they play less games, and they can protect it like that, right? But so this kid you worry about, worrying him out a little bit. That fastball dips into the low 90s. Now all of a sudden they're going to tee off on him a little bit. But early on, he's going to be the first half. He's going to be one of the best pitchers in baseball because they just don't know how to deal with this guy.
Yeah, coming into this season, I saw him pitch a little bit over the WBC, and I got to tell you, my initial reaction was kind of fake action. I thought the Cubs signed a guy who's maybe profiles as a 4 or 5 starter. Obviously, the numbers have looked great at the beginning of the season. I think that there is something to be said about the league figuring out a guy, right?
Yes.
And potentially figuring out what he's doing. And let's face it, he's not a pure stuff guy. You said it. He's more of a pitchability guy. Mm-hmm. It's funny because the Cubs now have 2 guys that are very similar in him and Justin Steele. I think they both have somewhat similar repertoires from the left side. I'll tell you this. I think he has an advantage, whereas Yamamoto's pitching in the West, which is, I think, improved offensively.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I think that, obviously we talked a little bit about the East. That Central Division to me is weaker offensively. The Reds are still figuring themselves out.
Right.
The Pirates, to me, which
we'll talk about
here soon, shortly, are still developing their offensive identity. The Brewers are still more pitch. I think he can probably navigate. And, do I expect him to be a top 10 guy? Probably not.
No.
So for the time being.
Yeah. Well, always, and because you did play at a high level in college, that pitchers always, when first-time pitcher versus first-time hitter, when they meet together, advantage almost 90% of the times. Pitcher.
Right.
The hitter has to figure out, what does this guy throw? How does he throw it? What's going on? And unless the dude just comes in and gives you, cookie cutter fastballs down the middle, but if he's giving you his repertoire and you don't know that repertoire real well, so that's why I'm saying that the first few times around the league, he's going to be an anomaly and he's going to be kind of a mystery because he does throw strikes and he makes his speeds well. After that, it'll be interesting. Put it this way: if you give me him or Senga, I'm taking Senga all day.
Oh yeah. So I hate to do it because I know he's your boy from Japan, but I'm going to label him until proven innocent. He's fake action until proven innocent, but he still proved me wrong.
You're not going all in on him.
And I got no beef with Japan. No,
they're doing real well.
On that note, talking about the NL Central, and there's another team. We just teased them. Oh, there's a team which one of your former ball clubs that you spent some time with, organizations, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Lo and behold, got off to a 9-3 start.
Yeah.
Around a team of veteran left-handed pitching and some really exciting young players. I'm not sure if the baseball public has seen Jared Jones pitch, but this is a 22-year-old arm who is electric. He reminds me of another guy that we'll talk about here shortly, Spencer Strider, believe it or not.
Yeah.
They have an absolute freak of nature playing shortstop. Your good old-fashioned 6'7" left-handed hitting shortstop in O'Neal Cruz. You have a really nice, underrated, underappreciated ball player in Brian Reynolds in the middle of that order. The Pirates are off to a start that is interesting in a division that I believe is truly up for grabs. Are the Pittsburgh Pirates the real deal, or are they fake action? What's your take?
I mean, listen, it's nice to see. I'm going to tell you why. This is one of the best baseball towns in baseball. Okay? Best, it's the 3B. Best baseball, betterment for the game. It's really good to see Pittsburgh and the fans over there because they're such diehard fans. It's crazy. I'm just going to go on and throw it out there because it's the reality that in two PA cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, you have complete opposite type fandom. Okay, you have Philadelphia fans that are diehard and they love their Phillies and the whole thing, but they're harsh as hell. Right? You do bad and you struggle and you have a few years of crappiness, they're going to let you know it.
You're going to hear it. Oh, yeah.
Pittsburgh are diehard fans with all their sports. Their hockey, obviously with their Steelers, their Penguins, and with the Pirates they've been frustrated, if anything, with the ownership of letting players go. And we can go back to the two Bay Area teams in a similar kind of concept of like, why are you letting, Garrett Cole go? Why are you letting, several of the other great guys go? And at least keep a couple of guys. But they have developed really well. So it's good for the community. It's exciting. They're fake action. The reality is that this team is not, the real deal. I like the additions of even veterans, Martin Perez, who's off to a nice little start because you need to have so many young arms in there. You need that crafty lefty in there that's going to give you some nice innings. But again, he's another one that's going to be limited as to, the full season. A lot of the league already knows his craftiness, and it's going to be interesting to see how Martin develops. You've got Chapman also been picked up there, so talk about another veteran lefty. But I still don't think I think this division, it comes down really to how Milwaukee wants to give this up or not. Milwaukee is the team of that division. They're the elite of that division, both on the pitching mound for sure, and on the offensive side, because they have some hammers too on the offensive side. So that division is Milwaukee's to lose, period. And then secondarily, I see the Cubs, I never rule out a St. Louis Cardinals because they're just always, they're pesky as hell. I'm not counting on them real high. But those are the two top teams for me, and I see Pittsburgh kind of falling into the middle of the pack this year.
I'll tell you this, though. I think by default, I'm with you. I got to label them fake action for now. But I'll tell you this. There's a couple names to remember here. There's a pitcher out of LSU who throws 102 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah. With the Kennis or whatever his name is.
Paul Skeens.
Skeens. But it's SK, yeah. Skeens.
Yep, Paul Skeens, who was
with movement. It's 102 that moves.
Oh man, this guy is currently looming in AAA,
right.
And to me, this is the closest I remember to that when he first broke into the big leagues, Steven Strasburg level effect.
Yeah, this is exciting.
This is that guy who can come out and carry that organization for a handful of years. You pair him, you pair Jared Jones, and then you have a really smart guy in Ben Cherington at the helm of this whole thing.
I agree.
I'm going to hit you with this. Do you know what the largest free agent or multi-year contract the Pittsburgh Pirates have ever given out was?
Multi-year contract. I would have to think that it would be. I'm trying to think of the player, not the amount or the years, but I would think that it would be somebody like Jeff King or
a little newer, but it's still 10 years ago. Listen to this,
right?
Francisco Liriano, 3 years, 39 million in 2014.
That was it. That was the longest.
That's the biggest financial splash that the Pirates organization has ever made. So
I believe Aaron Judge is making $39 million
this year. So, if this team and Cherington can assemble some momentum and they can build, especially with with the expanded playoffs and a couple scary arms at the front and the back end, because you have Aroldis Chapman, who you mentioned. Yep. You have David Bednar. You have Mitch Keller. You have a handful of guys, because I think that's the formula.
Do you think they could be the Arizona Diamondbacks of 24?
You need 3 impact starters and 4 or 5 shutdown relievers, or effective relievers. If you can mix and match that and get into the dance, anything can happen. So, team to look at. I'm with you. I will label them fake action for now, but we'll see how the season plays out. We're coming up to the end of the show here, but I want to leave you with what I think is the biggest story to look for at the end of this, into this week. And I'll tell you, not to be a homer, because for those who know, I'm a diehard Atlanta Braves guy.
Yeah, I'm a Yankee guy, so it's okay.
Yeah, Spencer Strider, who was the preseason favorite for NL Cy Young, last year's Major League wins and strikeouts leader. To me, was the most exciting pitcher in baseball. Went down this year with what has been called a UCL injury. Now, here's the caveat, he's seen a specialist in Texas, and we don't have an official diagnosis. A lot of people are speculating that he might undergo Tommy John surgery, which obviously would wipe out the end of 24 and a decent chunk of 2025 for Spencer Strider.
Right.
But, and here's the big but, there's a chance that he might not elect to go under the knife, especially if it's a partial tear or maybe an exacerbated sprain. And there is a precedent with this, there's a precedent with this with a pitcher well, Mr. Masahiro Tanaka, and I can see some parallels between those two guys, their makeup and how they approach pitching. Talk to me a little bit about what you saw from Tanaka and maybe what we might see from Strider.
Yeah, and it's an incredible parallel because body-wise, they're almost built the same way. They're like 6'1", 6'2", and just strong, huge legs, and had great push-off. And big shoulders, and just physically fit, because they call him Makun in Japan, M-A-K-U-N. Makun is a wonderful guy and a competitor and a half. And basically what happened to him, he came to the Yankees, won his first 12 decisions. And then I saw him pitch numerous times in Japan prior to becoming to the Yankees. And honestly, I've seen the best of the best in Japan, faced the best of the best in Japan, including arguably their best pitcher in the last 30 years, Hideo Nomo. And I took, after him owning me for a while, I ended up owning him for a while. And Hideo was something special at 98, 99 with a forkball, not a split, a true forkball, like a knuckleball. I feel that Tanaka coming into the major leagues with the Yankees was the greatest Japanese pitcher ever to come over. better than Yu Darvish, better than Sasaki, better than the best that we've seen of Ohtani.
Better than Ohtani, wow.
No, at another level. Yeah, lights out, high 90s, slider, splitter, two-seamer that ran, kept the ball. He was basically the Japanese version of Roger Clemens, period. That's how good he was. Then he has the nick in the elbow. They can't figure it out. And, well, they kind of figured it out. They knew it was a similar diagnosis. And he opted to not, until to this day, he's back pitching in Japan with the Sendai, the Rakuten Eagles. Basically, it'd be interesting if Strider chooses that. The catch with it is that what ended up happening with Tanaka is that he dropped, that velocity dropped from a consistent 97, 98 to the low 90s. He would pop up at 95 every now and then, but he kind of saved it, like Justin Verlander does, at a particular spot. More than anything, he was sinking and sliding you and splitting you. And even with that, he was multiple all-star, and just had a really nice major league, 5 or 6 year run. But do you want that, or do you want, to fix it rightfully? The problem is that he already had that once before, right?
Right. Yeah, he's had one Tommy John in college in Clemson before, and unfortunately, the numbers aren't, or the history isn't pretty for guys who have had multiple Tommy Johns.
Well, we're sitting at Ohtani waiting for a 2025 season, visiting just that. He just opted. Ohtani was in that same realm. He could have opted to try to do the Tanaka route, and it wasn't fully torn, but he said, let's fix it. But it's a different game for Shohei Ohtani when you know that you could pop 40 home runs. It'd still be relevant at a high level in the major leagues. Spencer has to sit out for a good amount of time. That's a tough call. I think that he's going to get, multiple looks at this and then finally make a family decision on it. But athletically, if he's similar to Tanaka, what Tanaka did, because I talked to him when he was with the Yankees and when he came back, he really trained really, really hard. He did, all the different exercises to keep that tight and keep it strong. Spencer Strider looks like a physical specimen, so I could see where he could probably do that. It's a tough call, man. It's a tough call.
Yeah, if following the Braves as closely as I do, there's very few in baseball and in sports, I can tell you, who take as much pride, put as much work in, and are as educated as Spencer Strider. He's a very, very brilliant guy, student of the game, meticulous exercise routine, and he's such a competitive guy. And the Braves are in such a unique position, where I think that despite the moves the Dodgers made this year, in spite of those moves,
I think they're
I still think the Atlanta Braves are the team to beat in Major League Baseball, even though the Rangers are the defending champions. So I think if there's anything that Strider can do, whether it's some form of rehab, some form of treatment that isn't going under the knife, I think he'd be willing to entertain it and at least try it. Only time will tell. It's going to be so we are going to be, glued to our televisions and radios and cell phones to see what the news is. But
to some degree, the Yankees are somewhat waiting for that news too. It's a little different because they didn't say that it was that aggressive with Garrett Cole. But if he comes back and it's not good, that the next call is that decision.
Right. So only time will tell. And on that note, guys, thank you so much for joining us on our first episode here at Drop and Drive. We look forward to giving you guys updates every single week for the fantastic,
enjoy the week of baseball.
Enjoy the week of baseball for the big O, Orestes Destrade. I'm Albert Destrade. Thank you for tuning in to Drop and Drive.